So, here's the deal, I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my fiancé, Daniel, is 32. We've been together for 5 years, living in our cozy little apartment, sharing laughs, love, and a life together that, honestly, I thought was perfect. Or at least, I did until last Friday. It all started when I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was a small, random thing at first, nothing that screamed affair across it. Just a dinner bill for 2 at this little Italian restaurant he'd never mentioned before. Weird, right? But I brushed it off, thinking maybe he went out with a colleague or a friend. It wasn't until a few days later that I noticed the pattern. The restaurant, the late nights, the strange texts he'd been getting. He'd always been pretty open with his phone, but lately, his fingers were glued to it like it was the Holy Grail. I didn't think much of it initially, I'm not a jealous person, but something didn't sit right. The sneaky way he'd scroll through his messages when I'd enter the room. The way his face would flush when I'd asked about his day. It was like he was hiding something, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it had to do with her. I wish I could say I just knew. I wish I could explain it like a gut feeling, like some cheesy scene out of a movie where the hero realizes everything has been a lie. But no! I had no concrete evidence, just whispers in the back of my mind. Then, that Friday came. I was running errands, killing time before meeting a friend for lunch, when I passed a coffee shop near the park. And who do I see sitting there? Daniel. Sitting across from a woman I've never seen before. At first, I told myself it was nothing, maybe she was a friend from work or one of his cousins. But the way they were talking, laughing, leaning in a little too close. It was weird. The way she was touching his arm. It didn't seem innocent. I didn't confront him right there. I couldn't. Not yet. I had to make sure. So, I stepped away, and I watched from the street corner, hidden behind the large window of the cafe. I know, it sounds crazy, but I had to see if I was reading it wrong. If I was just paranoid. But no! They were definitely more than just friends. The body language was undeniable. She was touching his shoulder, laughing at things that weren't even that funny. The longer I watched, the more my heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to burst through the cafe door and scream at both of them, but something held me back. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. So, I did what any sane person would do in that situation. I took a step back. I didn't rush in, even though every part of me was screaming to do so. I didn't call him. I didn't storm in there and yell at them both. I just stood there, frozen. Watching. Processing. Waiting. I watched as they wrapped up their coffee and stood to leave. And that's when I saw it, the thing that broke my heart the most. As they said goodbye, she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. Not a casual kiss, either. It was a lingering kiss, the kind that people only give when they share something more than just casual interests. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think. I just stood there, my hands trembling, my mind racing. The woman walked away, and Daniel turned in the opposite direction, oblivious to my presence. I don't even know how long I stood there, trying to make sense of everything. The world felt off-kilter, like it was tilting in some twisted direction. My stomach churned as my mind screamed in disbelief. Was this real? Was I seeing this correctly? The ride home was the longest, most agonizing drive I've ever had. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in complete silence, trying to gather the fragments of my thoughts. What the hell was I supposed to do with this information? What the hell had I just witnessed? I could have confronted him then and there, but something told me that wasn't the right move. No, this needed to be bigger. This needed to be a moment. A statement. I couldn't just let it go. I had to show him I wasn't someone who could be easily overlooked. I wasn't going to play the victim. I wasn't going to sit around and let this continue. So, I decided I wasn't going to confront him alone. I was going to do something that would send a message. Something he'd never forget. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he was doing. He needed to understand that I wasn't some passive person in this relationship who would just turn a blind eye to what was happening. And I didn't tell a single soul. No friends. No family. No one. I kept everything to myself and waited. I knew the perfect moment would come. I needed to find out who she was, where she worked, how to get in touch with her. I needed all the details, every single one, and I was determined to uncover them. I wasn't going to sit back any longer. I was going to take control. So, I spent the next couple of days obsessing over what I'd seen, overthinking every little detail. My stomach was in knots. I barely slept, my thoughts running wild. I felt like I was losing control of everything, of him, of us. He always seemed like the perfect fiancé, you know? And now? Now, he was some stranger, some guy I couldn't even recognize. It felt like everything I thought I knew about our life was a lie, and that was the hardest part. The betrayal wasn't just about him being with her, it was about the fact that I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. But even worse, I was stuck in this weird limbo. I didn't know how to approach him. How do you even bring something like that up? Hey, babe, I saw you kissing someone else in public. Mind explaining that? It didn't seem real. It still didn't seem like something I could just walk into a conversation about. I knew I needed answers, but I didn't want to lose him. Not yet, anyway. Maybe this could be fixed, right? Maybe he'd come clean. Maybe this was just a stupid mistake. Yeah, right. That's the part of me that was still holding on to hope. The rational side of me, though, the part that had been watching him with suspicion, knew better. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. So, the next few days, I kept my distance. He'd ask me what was wrong, but I didn't answer. How could I? What do you even say to someone who's been sneaking around behind your back? The whole thing felt so surreal. I was living in this weird version of reality where everything felt off, but no one could see it. I even started questioning myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had imagined everything. Maybe it was all just in my head. Then, I got the confirmation I was dreading. One night, I was scrolling through my social media, wasting time, when I saw it. The post. It was from her. The woman I'd seen Daniel with. It was innocent enough, a casual picture of her out with friends, but in the background, there was Daniel. He wasn't just there, though. He was all over her. His arm was around her waist, they were laughing together, and the way he was looking at her? It wasn't the look of a man who was just friends with someone. I froze. My heart sank. The room spun. This wasn't just an innocent lunch. This was something real. Something he'd kept from me. Something he'd made a secret. My stomach dropped, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. This was my answer. This was all the proof I needed. The truth was out, in plain sight. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I had to confront him. No more games. No more pretending. I had to go full force. But here's where it got tricky. I couldn't just let him off easy. I couldn't just be some woman in the background, pretending everything was fine while he lived this double life. No. I needed to make sure he understood how serious this was, how deeply hurt I was. I wasn't just going to let him waltz back into my life like nothing happened. That wasn't me. But here's the real challenge. I had no idea how he was going to react. Would he deny it? Would he play the victim? Would he try to manipulate me into thinking I was the crazy one? Would he lie his way out of it? The possibilities made my head spin. But one thing I knew for sure, I couldn't let him walk out of this unscathed. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after everything he'd done. I kept imagining the conversation in my head. It wasn't pretty. I knew I'd be angry. Hell, I was already furious. But I wasn't sure if I could keep my cool when I confronted him. Would I be able to hold it together, or would I break down? I had no idea. And the worst part? The part that made everything harder? The part that made me feel like I was suffocating? The woman in the picture with him? She wasn't some random fling. No. Her name was Emily, and I'd seen her around before. She was someone he'd talked about. Not often, but enough. She was someone who worked with him, someone he described as just a colleague, someone I met a few times at company events. But now, she wasn't just a colleague. She was the other woman. And I couldn't shake the thought that maybe she had always been more than that. Maybe this wasn't a fling. Maybe it was a full-blown affair, and I was just too blind to see it. What was worse, though, was that Emily didn't seem like some random person, some stranger I could ignore. She was someone who had been close enough to him to get his attention, to pull him away from me. She was someone I was going to have to face. And the thought of confronting both of them was eating away at me. I thought about it non-stop, about how I could approach it. How would I make them both see how this felt? How would I make Daniel realize he'd crossed a line that was unforgivable? How would I get Emily to understand that she had no right to play a part in this twisted little triangle? And still, I didn't know. I was shaking with anticipation, wondering when the right time would be to take control. When would I stop being passive and actually do something? It wasn't a matter of if anymore. It was a matter of when. How would I break the news to him? How would I make sure they both knew exactly what I knew? And just as I was about to get a grip on myself, something hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to confront them. Together. In public. The plan was simple. Too simple, really. I'd seen enough of their little secret to know that this wasn't something I could just brush aside. So, I was going to confront them, but not in some private, quiet space where they could lie their way out of it. No, I wanted an audience. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, to have to explain themselves under the gaze of strangers. I needed to show them that I wasn't just some fool. That I wasn't some passive character in their twisted little drama. The cafe. That's where I'd do it. It was the same one I'd seen them at before. The one where Daniel had been so comfortable with Emily. I figured, why not? Why not turn the tables and make them face me? Make them squirm in front of everyone. I wasn't just going to ask questions, I was going to demand answers. I spent hours planning it out in my head. What would I say? How would I approach them? How would I look when I walked up to them, calm on the outside but furious on the inside? My palms were sweating just thinking about it. I practiced in front of the mirror, trying to look confident, like I wasn't completely falling apart inside. But no matter how much I rehearsed, nothing could prepare me for how I'd feel when I actually walked into that cafe. The day finally came. I put on my best outfit, something that made me feel strong. I wanted them to know I was serious. This wasn't a mistake I could forgive. I wasn't going to play the victim. As I walked down the street toward the cafe, my heartbeat was in my throat. The closer I got, the more the nerves hit. But I couldn't back out now. I wasn't going to let them win. I saw them before they saw me. Daniel and Emily were sitting at the corner table, laughing, oblivious. He had his hand resting on her arm, his eyes sparkling as they whispered back and forth like they were the only people in the world. My stomach churned. I didn't know which part of this was worse, the sight of them together, or the way I'd been blind to it for so long. I almost turned around then. Almost walked away. But no! I was already there. I was already committed. I stepped inside, my heels clicking loudly on the floor. Their conversation stopped when they saw me, and for a moment, everything felt like it was suspended in time. Daniel looked shocked, like he'd seen a ghost, his eyes wide with guilt. Emily's face? Blank. Cold. She didn't even seem surprised. I took a deep breath and walked right up to their table, trying to keep my cool. Trying to stay composed. "Well, this is an interesting little setup," I said, my voice steady but laced with more venom than I intended. Daniel stood up immediately, his face pale. He opened his mouth like he was about to speak, but the words didn't come. Emily just sat there, unfazed, staring me down like I was the problem. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," I continued, my eyes shifting between them. I wasn't going to give him the chance to explain himself before I had my say. "You think I didn't know, don't you? You thought I was too naive, too stupid to figure out what's been going on between the two of you. But guess what? I'm not an idiot." Daniel started to stammer, but I cut him off. I couldn't listen to him right now. Not after everything. "Save it, Daniel," I said, looking straight at Emily. "How long has this been going on, huh? How long have you been sleeping with my fiancé behind my back?" Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch or look away. She just stared at me, cold as ice. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said in a tone that felt too rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I could feel my blood boiling. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But I held it in. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't about to lose it. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I shot back. "I know everything. The late nights, the secret dinners, the texts I wasn't supposed to see. I saw you with him, Emily. You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't see how close you two are? How he's been lying to me this whole time." Daniel looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. I couldn't even look at him without wanting to punch him. He opened his mouth again, but this time, I let him speak. I can explain." I shook my head, cutting him off again. "Explain what, Daniel?" "Explain how you've been cheating on me for who knows how long. How you've been playing me for a fool while you—" I pointed at Emily, my hand shaking, "play house with her." Emily leaned back in her chair, unfazed. "You're overreacting," she said flatly. "We didn't mean for you to find out this way." "Overreacting?" The words hit me like a slap. "Oh, I'm sorry, am I overreacting?" I asked, my voice getting louder now. "You think I'm the one in the wrong here? You think I'm the crazy one? You think I'm imagining all this?" Daniel looked between us, his face twisting in guilt. But Emily, she didn't even flinch. She just looked at me like I was the one causing a scene, like I was the one who didn't belong here. I wanted to tear my hair out. This wasn't supposed to be happening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go down. But it was happening. Right there, in front of me. And there was nothing I could do to take it back. I wasn't sure what I expected from this confrontation. Maybe I thought he'd break down and beg for forgiveness. Maybe I thought she'd apologize, maybe even feel a little guilty for what she'd done. But all I saw was their cold indifference. And that hurt more than anything else. I stood there, staring at them both, and it felt like time had stopped. The world outside the cafe seemed to fade away, leaving just the three of us in this raw, charged silence. There was so much tension hanging in the air, I could practically feel it crackling between us. I thought I had been prepared. Thought I knew how this was going to go. But standing there, in front of them both, the weight of it all hit me harder than I expected. Daniel looked like he was about to crumble into himself. His lips were trembling, like he didn't know what to say but knew he needed to say something. He was opening his mouth, then closing it again, like a man who had lost all his words. It was pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And Emily? She was stone cold. Like none of this fazed her. She was sitting there, arms folded, looking at me like I was some inconvenience, like I was the one who had something to explain. I wanted to scream at her, ask her how she could sit there so calmly when she was the one who had just destroyed everything. But I didn't. I kept my voice low, though there was nothing calm about it. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Daniel?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected, like I was trying to hold back the floodgates of rage threatening to burst out. He opened his mouth again, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. "No. You don't get to explain yourself right now," I said. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands still shaking, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. "You've been lying to me for months, Daniel. Months. And you think you can just sit there and apologize your way out of this? What makes you think I'm just going to forgive you?" "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said, finally managing to speak, his voice cracking. I don't know what came over me. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" My laugh was bitter. "A mistake? You're sitting here telling me that sleeping with someone else behind my back is a mistake?" I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe how easily he was trying to dismiss everything. Like what we had meant nothing. Like I was just some other woman he could take for granted. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. No. This wasn't about that. This was about showing him I wasn't weak, that I wasn't going to let this slide. Emily's eyes flicked between us, and for a moment, I thought I saw something resembling guilt cross her face. But it was gone so quickly, I could have imagined it. She wasn't sorry. She didn't care. I could see it now. Her coldness, her lack of any real remorse. It made me sick. She shifted in her seat, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. "Look, you don't know what's been going on between us," she said, her tone more matter-of-fact than apologetic. "This isn't something that was planned, okay? It just happened." It took everything in me not to burst into laughter. "Just happened?" I repeated, a bitter edge to my voice. "Are you kidding me? You're telling me this wasn't planned? That it wasn't intentional?" I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her, make her see how wrong she was, how wrong they both were. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at Daniel again, my eyes narrowing. "You're just going to sit there and let her speak for you? You're going to let her justify all of this?" Daniel was still sitting there, lost, like he couldn't wrap his head around what had happened. His mouth opened again, and this time, he actually said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear, I never meant for it to get this far." "Then why didn't you stop?" I shot back, my voice rising again. "Why didn't you stop when it got too close? Why didn't you come clean when I started asking questions? You think I'm stupid, Daniel? You think I wouldn't notice? You didn't care enough to stop. You didn't care enough to choose me." The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time, Daniel looked ashamed. He dropped his gaze to the table, not able to meet my eyes anymore. Emily, however, wasn't so easily rattled. She just sat there, her arms still crossed, a look of resignation on her face. I could feel the anger rising, but there was something else too, something more painful than I'd expected. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. It was the realization that this whole relationship, everything I thought we had built together, had been nothing but a lie. And they didn't even have the decency to be ashamed of it. I took a step back, suddenly feeling like the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't breathe. I don't know who either of you are anymore, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I don't recognize either of you. You've destroyed everything I thought was real. And for what? For whatever this is? I looked at Daniel, his face full of regret, but it wasn't enough. It never would be. You've lost me, I whispered, my voice trembling now. I didn't care. It was true. He had. You've lost everything. You don't get to come back from this. Not after everything. Not after her. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away. The cafe felt like 1,000 miles away, the sound of my footsteps echoing in my mind, drowning out everything else. I didn't look back. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My feet carried me out of that cafe and down the street, and the world around me seemed to blur. People passed by, but I couldn't hear them. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears, and the rush of adrenaline that made my legs feel like jelly. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there. I couldn't be in that place anymore with them, knowing everything that had just happened. My mind was racing, but I was strangely numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. I found a quiet park bench a few blocks away and sat down, burying my face in my hands. I couldn't even cry. Not yet. The hurt, the anger, it was all too raw. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, but there was no physical pain. Just the heavy weight of everything crashing down on me. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely alone. Like the person I thought I was, this confident woman who had everything figured out, wasn't real. Who was I now? Who was I without him? Without us? I didn't want to think about it. But I had to. I had to face the reality of what had just happened. Daniel was gone. The life I'd built with him, gone. And Emily? She was just a ghost now, someone I didn't even want to think about. I pulled out my phone, almost without realizing it, and stared at the screen. I knew there were 100 messages from friends asking where I was. I knew they'd want to know what happened. But I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face them. Hell, I wasn't ready to face myself. I glanced at the time and realized how long I'd been sitting there, the hours slipping away without me even noticing. The sun was starting to set, the warm golden light turning the sky a soft shade of pink. I should have felt something, comfort, maybe, but instead, I just felt like I was in a different world. A world that no longer made sense. I was shaking now, the tears finally coming. But they weren't tears of sadness. Not entirely. They were tears of relief. The anger had burned so hot, so fiercely, that now it was like this quiet, simmering release, this aching emptiness. I needed to be done. I needed to make a decision. I could keep spinning in circles, obsessing over what Daniel had done, wondering if I'd ever get closure. Or I could let it go. Walk away. Choose myself. I knew what I had to do. I called my best friend, Anna. She'd been texting me all afternoon, and I figured it was time to face the music. The phone rang, and for a second, I almost chickened out. But then I heard her voice, warm and familiar, and I couldn't hold back anymore. "Hey," I said, my voice shaky. "I need to talk." There was a pause, then a soft, understanding tone on the other end. "Of course. Where are you?" I'm not sure. But I need to get out of here." She didn't ask questions, not yet. She just told me to meet her at a cafe nearby. I didn't want to go back to the same place, the place where everything had started to fall apart. But it didn't matter. I needed someone who wasn't involved, someone who could see things from a distance. Someone who could help me figure out what came next. I walked to the cafe, the streets feeling strangely empty. Like the whole world had paused, waiting for me to make the next move. The moment I walked in, I saw Anna sitting in the corner, her eyes lighting up as she waved me over. I sat down across from her, and before I could say a word, she looked at me with this knowing, gentle expression. "I know," she said quietly, her voice full of compassion. "I saw the post." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Instead, I just stared down at my hands, feeling like the weight of everything was still crushing me. But Anna was patient. She didn't push. She just let me breathe, let me be. "I don't know what to do," I finally whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to move on from this. I don't know who I am without him." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You'll figure it out," she said softly. "You always do." And somehow, in that moment, I believed her. I didn't know how it would all play out. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let his lies, his betrayal, shape who I was going to be. I wasn't broken. I was just starting over. That night, I went home, and for the first time in days, I slept. Deeply. Not because everything was perfect. Not because I had all the answers. But because I knew I had made the hardest choice I'd ever make, and it felt like freedom. I didn't reach out to Daniel. I didn't need to. He'd made his choice. And now, I was making mine.